All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is go over this next exam. And so you'll be getting that tonight. Uh, and I think it's already open. Tonight we're going to go through narrative therapy, but that's not on your exam. I think you should already know what's on your exam, but we'll go over each question. All right. And it's exactly like the old exam, the first one you took. So you should be pros at this. And, but I'll answer any questions. We'll kind of review it again and go from there. So let me look at it here. Okay. So it's under tonight's class. It's under week class 12. And all right, so exam 3, you'll put it in Dropbox for exam 3. And I'll just go through it again. Like I said, it's exactly the same as before. So please submit exam 3 to this Dropbox with all the questions together in one Word file. Don't cut and paste the entire narrative, just the question. If you cut and paste this whole exam thing, it'll give you a very high Turnitin score, okay? And we want your Turnitin score to be under 5%. So that means you don't need to quote Corey. In fact, please don't. And, none of these are his theory. And I would say, put everything in your own words. So I'll review. So it's due before next class. So you'll have a week to do this, just like last time. I'll review this exam, answer any questions in class. You can also send me an email this week if you have any specific questions. You've got an adequate time to complete this. So please don't ask for extensions unless you have like a real emergency. Begin working on it early. Now you know it takes a long time to complete these exams. And like I recommended last time, I just do like one question a day. That way you're not going to get mixed up between your theorists and use the wrong terminology or techniques or anything like that. So remember, this exam is an application of the theoretical knowledge. You're not telling me the theory. Okay, we already know the theories. You're applying the theory. So this is not a description of the theory. You're not going to say REBT is. We don't need that. You're going to apply REBT. So, and you're going to apply the theories to the same case as before, 3 different theoretical approaches. So case will be presented first, depicting client named Sam. We'll go through that. There's 3 essay questions on the exam. And okay, so kind of how you go about writing this exam, little outline here for you. How would you use each of the 3 theories to help the client if you were his therapist? Each theory should be easily recognizable for each question. This is not an exam reviewing the theories themselves. It's an exam that demonstrates your ability to apply these theories to the case. So each case essay should have 3 primary parts, each in its own paragraph. So, number 1, the first part, first paragraph, a discussion of the case using theoretical concepts, extensive terminology. How do you know what terminology to use? Just use your notes. What's in the notes? What terms are used in the notes? I use the notes as a checklist, basically. Did you include this term? Did you include that term? Should be from a developmental outlook, if that's included. Use examples applied to the client. So don't just say, I would dispute irrational thoughts. You have to apply that to Sam. What irrational thoughts? How would you apply it? What would you say? What would Sam's reaction be? How, you have to be specific. You can't just say, I would do this, In fact, I would talk about it in part 2 as if it were happening in the present. So, but we're talking about section 1, use examples applied to the client. Each theory looks at this case differently. This section is about case history. So everything in Sam's past is paragraph 1. And, that's what brought the client to counseling. This is the past. It's about one long paragraph. It's not one tiny paragraph. There's a lot that went on in Sam's past. So it's one long paragraph. Okay, part 2. This is the tough part. This is the session. A discussion of a therapeutic session. Describe the session using appropriate terminology. Don't just jump into 2 techniques. That's not a session. There's a lot that goes on in a session before you start using techniques. So if you're using REBT, you're not just going to jump into A, B, C, D, E, F. There's a lot more to talk about in the notes and in my lecture than just the technique. So, describe the session. Use the terminology that appears in the notes. Don't just jump to the techniques. And it does include, but is not limited to, at least 2 techniques or interventions for each theory. And we'll discuss each theory when we get to the questions, but discuss how each technique is used, how it might play out in the session when used in the client. You can't just say you're going to use a technique. You have to apply it to Sam. What would Sam say? What would you say? What would Sam's response be? And remember, we're not talking about anything from the past. We're talking about things that are happening just with Sam in the present. Maybe Sam wants to go on a date. Maybe Sam wants a new job. That has nothing to do with the past. What would a brief therapeutic dialogue look like? This section focuses on the client in the present, not the past. This should be the longest section, about 1 page long. It all happens in the present. And then the last part, part 3. What would 8 weeks of therapy look like? How would a treatment plan look applied to this specific client? Add anything from the theories that you think might be important in the therapy. Do not just list theoretical attributes and techniques you'll use in future sessions. Describe how they will be applied to the specific client and why. What is the expected growth and outcome? This focuses on the client in future sessions, about 1 long paragraph. So you can't just use a technique. You can't just say, okay, we talked about relationships and Sam in the session. Now in the future, we're going to follow up with that, but we're also going to talk about Sam's career using A, B, C, D, E, F. You can't just use a technique in future sessions. What else will you talk about with Sam? What would that look like? How would you apply it to Sam? All right. So that's kind of the outline for each essay question. So the case study's generic. You've got enough general information for the case study and the session. Please only use 1 primary theory. If I say REBT, that is not CBT or CT or anything else Corey mentioned in the book. It's just 1 theory. If I say Family Systems Bowen, it is not Virginia Satir or any other theory. It's just Bowen. So let's see, most likely each answer will end up being about 2 pages total. Please submit your exam in a Word document to the Dropbox for exam 3. All right. You can use your book. You can use notes. You can use PowerPoints. Do not use the internet. Do not quote Corey. Use your own words, except when applying theoretical terminology. All right. You can read The Case of Sam. I don't need to read it again to you. Exam questions, and we can talk about each theory as we go through the questions. And you can ask me anything you want. Now's the time. So speak up online because I can't see your pictures. All right. If you were Albert Ellis, how would you apply REBT? And you must include A, B, C, D, E, F as the technique in part 2 of the answer. So A, B, C, D, E, F is going to be your techniques, okay? And I would recommend, running through all 6 letters in the session and either apply it to relationships or careers. And what is stopping Sam internally? What is Sam's irrational belief? And, dispute that, have Sam come up with a more rational belief that is more positive, and maybe something that he can say to himself next time he catches himself thinking negatively about himself or this subject. And then, in the part 3, the future treatment plan, yes, you're going to include A, B, C, D, E, F, but there's more to REBT than just A, B, C, D, E, F. What else would be in the session? What else would be in the future treatment plan beyond this technique? Okay, so that's probably the easiest question on this exam. It's very straightforward. So basically, if you include everything in my notes in the book on REBT and run through A, B, C, D, E, F, you pretty much got it. Questions about REBT or SAM or how you might use it? All right. So feminist theory, I also think, question 2. Feminist theory, I think, is also a fairly straightforward theory, and, we're going to apply it to Sam because we can apply feminist theory to anybody. Everybody grows up with gender role messages. So in section 1, we're going to talk about the negative gender role messages he got from his family. But in the session, in part 2, we're no longer going to talk about those. We're not going to talk about the dad or the mom or being bullied or anything else. Now we're going to talk about the messages that Sam is carrying with him and empower him to help him choose more positive messages on his own. He has that power to do that. He can decide on his own messages. And, it might be, what is he looking for in a relationship? What role does he want to play? What role does he want his partner to play? I know he wants a more equality-based relationship. So remember, his mom was more equality minded. His father was not. And, I think he wants to break that cycle, but we don't, we can talk about that in section 1. Now he's just moving on to a more positive, healthy format for himself and a relationship in the session. What's that going to look like? What choices is he going to make? So first, we've got the gender role messages as the first technique. The second technique, I would recommend maybe like group support, But there's more to this than just the 2 techniques. Look through the notes. What else would you talk about with him beyond the past? It's more about what he thinks about himself in the present. All right.
Can I ask a question about group? Recommending group to him, is that like part of the session, or is the group what we write?
That's a good question. How do we do group? Well, yeah, I don't want you to have to write a group. So honestly, you can pick, yeah, that's a good question. So why don't you recommend group in the future, like in part 3? And then you don't have to write out, a dialogue for a group or anything like that. You can talk about what kind of group it would be, why he would fit in well with it, what kind of support it would provide in the future. And in the session, you can pick any one of those other techniques listed in the notes. Even bibliotherapy, if you pick a good book. You can't just say, I reckon we're going to use bibliotherapy in the session. What are you going to read? What are you going to talk about? So you actually have to play it out a little bit. But the main thing is gender role messages. If you get that, you won't have to write the question. All right. Questions about feminist therapy. Shelley.
I apologize, Professor. I was waiting to see if you maybe answered it when you went on to question 2. What are you considering to be part 4? Because there's 3 questions, right? There's not 4.
So question number 1 has 3 parts. Question number 2 has 3 parts. Question number 3 has 3 parts. There's no
right, but in number 1, where you just put exam question to address with Albert Ellis, you said you may also use A, B, C, D, E, F in part 4 for a different issue. What did you mean as in part 4?
Oh, that's a typo. There you go.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So let's see. Also use A, B, C, D, F in part 3. There you go. Part 3. So you can use A, B, C, D, E, F in part 2 and part 3. It just has to be with a different issue.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. What else? All right. So question number 3 is the toughest one. All right. And it's difficult because I want you to use Bowen's 8 key concepts. And most of those concepts talk about what is wrong, and they need to be processed to create an awareness in the client. And then that awareness has to promote positive change. And then that needs to be discussed. So this is the trickiest, So I'll read the question and I'll walk you through the answer. If you were a family systems theorist, how would you apply this approach in detail to this case? Include aspects from Bowen's 8 key concepts in each section to facilitate awareness and change in place of techniques. So processing the 8 key concepts, that's the techniques. So Sam's family can be processed in part 1. So part 1 for family may be a little longer than in the other questions. And this is really about the case history. So, if you think about Bowen's key concepts, is Sam differentiated? No. Why not? What's going on with that? Was there triangulation? Was there, what was going on? Was this passed down multi-generationally? Was there family projection? Was there emotional cutoff? What was going on with those different concepts? And give me an example of what was going on in the past with these family. So in the present, in the session, in part 2 of the question, you've processed the family. Now Sam's new goal is to break this cycle. And you don't even need to talk about the family. You're just talking about Sam. How is Sam going to differentiate himself in future relationships? How's he going to become independent and yet in a healthy relationship? How's he going to deal with his emotions? And, Bowen didn't use the word codependent, but how's he going to stop being codependent and become individuated? How's he going to avoid triangulation? What's he going to look for in a healthy relationship so that he doesn't pass this unhealthy cycle onto his future children? So how's he going to become a healthy individual and overcome the negative aspects of these key concepts in Bowen? And you don't need to talk about his past at all to do that. You're just talking about Sam. And then in the future, since remember, Bowen is family systems, that concept of the system can be translated not only with family, but it could be a working environment. It could be an environment with a peer group. It could be any system. So you could talk maybe about what a healthy, happy work environment might look like for Sam versus his current one in part 3. So your bonus question is, if you want to make a genogram of Sam, and you can do that in Word, or there is a genogram program, and I believe you can print as a PDF and upload that. And if you want, or you can just put it in your Word document. But you have to look at my genogram at the end of the paper I included in the notes. It has to have a legend. It has to have all the symbols for the different relationship emotions. Is there conflict? Was there a divorce? You have to look at all the symbols that I included. And then you have to write about them. You have to make notes. So you could have his parents and you can have Sam. It only needs to be 2 generations. It should be pretty simple, but it's got to be really detailed with all of the emotional relationships. All right, questions about family systems? All right, that's the exam.